buying time, killing people next in line. Lower classes, social slime, they don't matter. Genocide, sick from water, sick from air. Making money, they don't care. Caesar shit, force them out. Fuck them back, it's only for they bomb. They shoot, they kill, they massacre, rape. They burn the kids. No one makes countries. Lie to your face, fight and die. Cause God forgives. Selling lies and buying time, killing people next in line. Lower classes, social side, they don't matter. Genocide, sick from water, sick from air. Making money, they don't care. See their shit, force a bear. Fuck them back, that's only fair. They bomb, they shoot, they kill, they massacre, rape. They burn the kids. No one makes countries. Lie to your face, fight and die. Cause God forgives. Yeah. Coming back around again.
Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Ron Stevens, and this is Game On UCY.TV, the best little online radio network there is. And today's September the 10th, and we're headed to here in the next week or so into the asylum. They're bringing the asylum right to us. It's amazing. You know, last night here in Canada, we had Prince Albert of Monaco among the royalty and the celebrities expected for the Eco Gala. Yeah. Prince Albert is in Toronto for a fundraiser Wednesday night in support of his charitable foundation, Global Environmental Initiatives. Hollywood celebrities, including James Franco, Martin Short, and Misha Barton, will also attend the first annual AMBI Gala at the Four Seasons Hotel on the eve of the Toronto International Film Festival. Cinema... well, let me go back here for a second. Proceeds of the gala established by Lady Monica Bacardi, and I can't read this other name, of AMBI Pictures will go to the Prince Albert to Monaco Foundation. It has supported over 340 projects to date with a total investment of more than $33.6 million. Cinema, you know, is not just about glamour, said Bacardi. A Monaco entrepreneur and philanthropist and member of a foundation. Cinema can contribute to and help the world bring attention to things, and in this case, the issue is, I don't know, let me guess here for a minute. The environment? Yeah, because we all live in a world of pollution. No clean water, no clean air, no clean mountains, no clean anything. We just live in a world of pollution. Diana Ross will also perform. I didn't know she was still out and about. Created in 2006, Prince Albert II of Monaco Foundation is dedicated to the initiatives in three main fields: climate change, biodiversity, and sustainable management of water resources. All proceeds go to both public and private projects. Yada, 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 yeah. Let me see here. the movie Arctic Justice Thunder Squad is an animated 3D family feature starring the voice of Alec Baldwin, John Cleese, Angelica Houston, and Franco. It is scheduled for release in 2018. Yeah. Yeah. This is all about the environment. And that's a good thing, really, don't you think? The environment is all that matters. Starting on the 21st in New York, environmental hell is going to break loose. I don't mean the environment is going to collapse. All the loonies from the environmental movement are going to show up in New York City, which makes sense because New York City is the city, for the most part, that's used for all these doom and gloom movies about the future. And New York City was the city used in Soylent Green and Escape from New York and a whole bunch of movies, right? New York just gets real screwed up. So it makes sense that this is where they hold all these Looney Tune affairs. And of course the United Nations is there. Anyway, I'm going to just buzz through some of this stuff. On Sunday, September the 21st, like if you're not doing nothing on Sunday, September the 21st, and, slide on down to New York and watch the Looney Festival. A climate march through Midtown Manhattan will kick off a week of high-profile climate events in the Big Apple, promoted as an effort to bring unprecedented attention to climate change. The gathering comes just as an international climate negotiations ramp up in major push toward a new global accord. The People's Climate March, being called the largest climate march in history by organizers, will potentially draw over 100,000 people to walk through Manhattan like a bunch of complete mindless sheep, idiot, fool, dickweeds, and show a level of demand for action not seen since the era of civil rights marches and anti-Vietnam protests. See, this is going to be a big one, folks. You don't want to miss it. 2 days after the march, the United Nations Summit on the Climate Crisis will bring together world leaders, business executives, and activist groups in an attempt to galvanize action for a global climate deal to follow the Kyoto Protocol. While not an official UN negotiating sessions, leaders have been invited to announce significant and substantial initiatives to help move the world toward a path that will limit global warming. The third major undertaking in this three-pronged climate attack, three-pronged triangle, the three global rings, the three rings of the United Nations, the three rings of the Olympics, it's always threes, right? The satanic triangle, if you want to call it, D.C. and the Vatican and London City. It's always got to be three. Anyways, going to feature around 100 events, activities, high-profile meetings across the city. It is put together by the Climate Group, which includes businesses and government organizations focusing on the rapid scale-up of low-carbon energy and technology. Overall, more than 1,000 organizations have pledged support for the People's Climate March. Doesn't that sound, the People's Climate March, doesn't that sound kind of like Soviet, or Chinese? The People's March. And that's what it is, folks. The old hammer and the sickle, they want to try and bring it down on your neck. But we ain't going to let it happen. Let's see. The Sierra Club World Wildlife Fund, the National Wildlife Federation, and the Earth Day Network have all pledged support, plus the 1,000 other organizations. Students from more than 300 colleges and universities expected to attend the march, while the leaders of China and India recently said they wouldn't be attending the UN summit. President Obama is expected to be there. Even if certain world leaders don't show up for the political or logistical reasons, governments and stakeholders across the world will be watching for serious movement on what has become a slowed down or even stalled path toward an effective global climate treaty. This mass convergence of interested parties could provide a crucial step in breaking the bottleneck. This is the hope of Bill McKibben, climate author and environmentalist turned activist and co-founder of 350.org, who says the march is an invitation to anyone who'd like to prove to themselves and their children that they give a damn about the biggest crisis our civilization has ever faced. Well, what he should be saying, it's an invitation to anyone who would like to prove to themselves and their children that these climate clowns are out of their frickin' minds, and we ain't going to put up with it. He goes on to say, the point is, sometimes you can grab the zeitgeist by the scruff of the neck and shake it a little. At that moment, the overwhelming sense around the world is nothing will happen in time. A loud movement, one that gives our leaders permission to actually lead and then scares them into doing so, is the only hope of upending that prophecy. Brilliant. So it tells you how to get there. They've got all kinds of side events. You have, let's see, the Convergent for climate conferences. Let's see, that's include hip-hop artist, Immortal Technique. Brilliant. And let's see, Naomi Klein will be there, author of This Changes Everything, Capitalism versus the Climate, and the Shock Doctrine will be there. The People's Climate Justice Summit on the 22nd and 23rd will convene community delegations to focus on the front lines of climate change, where the poor and vulnerable are often the hardest hit. Now, that's on 22nd, 23rd. If I'm not mistaken, that Dick, what's his name, Mr. Pope? Not Bob Hope, but Mr. Pope, is going to be in Philly, I think, on the 23rd, talking to the poor. So it just stands to reasons that the Climate Justice Summit will be on the 22nd, 23rd, and we'll be talking about the poor and the vulnerable. Some delegates will convene at the UN Church Center, directly across the street from the UN, and the proceedings will be live streamed for the public viewing at the New School, whatever that's supposed to be. The organizers argue that the UN Climate Summit represents the next step in corporate takeover of the UN climate negotiations. They want to bring attention to the indigenous peoples, communities of color, working class, white communities that are the first and most impacted by storms, floods, and droughts, exacerbated by climate change. Now, I don't understand that exactly, how it is that the organizers argue that the UN Climate Summit represents the next step in corporate takeover of the UN climate negotiations. And that's what this has always been about, a global corporate government using climate change, catastrophe, refugees, to put the position so that only a global government, which is corporate run, can save the planet. Well, we all know that's a bunch of nonsense, but that's been the whole plan. So, these idiots are going to go on this march banging on their drums and go, ooh, 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 save the planet, ooh, 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 save the planet. Can these clowns not make the connection yet? This has been going on for how many decades now? They not make the connection? Or they just bust in players? Or they bust in actors, the way they bust in actors for political events. They're bringing kids in from 300 schools. So you know what they did. You know, they go through, they vet everybody. Who wants to beat on a drum? Oh, I do. Okay, get on the bus. You go to New York. Just get out there and beat that damn drum. Well, your corporate overlords ink some deals here. Okay, so the idea is to keep the people looking at the street and watching the nonsense going on in the street while the big boys are sitting in the back room sucking on cigars and drinking good scotch, inking deals. Same thing they did up here in Canada in 2010 with the G20 meeting. All this nonsense that was going on in the streets with all these riot cops and all that stuff. Cameras never even went near what the meeting was about. The big boys sat in there sucking on their cigars and drinking their good scotch, inking deals. Sooner or later, people got to get this little pattern that goes on everywhere that happens. This nonsense happens. At some point, they got to get it. But they want to bring attention to the indigenous peoples' communities of color, and working class white communities. Because these, according to these guys, are the first and most impacted by storms, floods, and droughts, exacerbated, of course, by climate change. Now, I don't know why just the poor people and the native people and the colored people and the white trash working in whatever they're working in. The corporate takeover of the UN climate negotiations, the corporate guys care. The corporate guys are saying they care about the indigenous people's communities of color, and the poor white working class, because they're the first and most impacted by storms, floods, and droughts? Who writes this garbage? And how do people get suckered in by this garbage? Then we have, we got to get the religion in here, another messed up bunch of people. The Religions for the Earth Conference will bring together the more than 200 religious and spiritual leaders from across the world to gather at Union Theological Cemetery from September 19th to 21st. On Sunday after the Climate March, a multi-faith service focused on climate change at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine will feature, excuse me, listeners, excuse me, please. I just came very close to throwing up in my mouth. I'm going to do this one more time. The Religion for Earth Conferences will bring together more than 200 religious and spiritual leaders from across the world to gather at Union Theological Seminar from September 19th to 21st on Sunday after the Climate March, a multi-faith service focused on climate change at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine will feature, this is where I choked up and almost threw up, will feature former President Al Gore. Well, you see, Al Gore in his book, and I forget what the hell it was called, Al Gore writes some garbage on paper, I guess was the name of the book. But he said the last vestiges of what the hell was it? The last vestiges of Earth worship, or whatever it was wiped out by Christianity. Okay, so this, like I keep saying, two things got to go down, folks: the Constitution and the Bible. Now, when I look at this one paragraph here about 200 religious and spiritual leaders, this is the same thing they did at Agenda 20 or at Rio 92, and I think they did it again in 2012. And it's the same crap that goes on at the Baca Ranch, which is owned by Morris Strong and the Klan, who have a bunch of these spiritual leaders out there in Colorado doing the same thing, and they chant and carry on, trying to bring the earth spirits or something. Yeah, it's crazy. They're crazy. NEC, let's see here. Inside Climate News also made a handy graphic pointing out the top places to be during the climate week. Now, you want to get a copy of this because these are the top places you want to be. Aside from the People's Climate March, the UN Climate Summit, and the Religions for the Earth Conference, the list includes the Clinton Global Initiative Annual Meeting, the Carbon Tracker Initiatives, the inaugural Rising Seas Summit, the Colloquium of Forests and Climate, the IETA and ICAP High-Level Carbon Pricing Dialogue, Carbon Forum North America, and the World Conference on Indigenous Peoples. Two climate-oriented documentaries will also be presented during the week: Disruption and Climate Heroes: Stories of Change, produced as an initiative of the United Nations Climate Change Secretariat, and connects 9 stories about climate action around the world. Narrated by actor and UNEP Goodwill Ambassador Ian Somerhalder. The film features positive development, such as the development of clean energy technologies on the path toward migrating and adapting to climate change. Now, this is all going on. It starts the day before the Pope gets here, and it runs through his entire week that he's here. So this is the big ramp up. And all the loonies are going to show up. And they are loony. Dangerous, but loony. And we got to try and have some fun with this. I mean, we got to do whatever we can to let people know what's going on with these nutcases. And, you know, it's keep in mind, here, I'll finish this up first. The point of the People's Climate March is not to impose demands. In fact, there are no specific demands associated with the march, but to show how the climate movement has come into the mainstream, no longer just an environmental issue. The demonstration has drawn support from labor unions, faith groups, schools, businesses, international NGOs, social justice groups, public health entities, and more. And these are all groups who, doesn't matter what group it is, just put in the word international and you'll find them, and you'll find them linked back to the UN. And the UN said many years ago that they were going to use all these groups as actors in order to push the agenda. And so that's what they're doing. On top of the breadth of interest, it is also meant to display the urgency of the cause, widely being compared to crucial moments along the march towards civil rights action and anti-war movements. The words of Martin Luther King calls to action, or his call to action, read as if they could have been written by an orator for this month's event. This is so sad. It is so freaking sad. But this is all build up later in the year over to Paris. So from here on in, it's going to be hardballing in your face 24/7 as they attempt to get enough support okay. I'm sorry, I just got a Skype there. I was kind of trying to do 2 things at once. I can multitask to a point. But anyways, that's enough of that what's going on in New York specifically. But my wife made the mistake of looking up the weather the other day on the Weather Network. And she almost fell out of her chair because it was the Weather Network, and they had a big piece on there about climate refugees. And I thought that was rather odd. But good for us, because she read the comments that were in it, and none of them were positive towards what they were pushing. People are not as stupid as these so-called world leaders, world hustlers, world fraudsters, believe they are. So I just went and I punched in. See, ever since that little kid died on the beach or drowned on the beach or whatever happened there, they have picked up this kid and they have run with him as their climate refugee disaster story. And they're gonna. I mean, they have no morals whatsoever. These are extremely sick people. Oh, here's a little dead boy on the beach. We can use that. Plug this kid's face on every major newspaper and media outlet you can get your hands on. Let's punch it. They don't give a damn about the little kid or the little kid's parents or any of these other people they've turned into refugees, and they're not climate refugees. They're bombing refugees. But you can look at that as climate too, because they do. So as I go through this thing, I just punched in climate refugees, and it's just a never-ending list. Now, I did have a guy in here. I don't think I have that open anymore. If I do, I don't know where it is. But let me see. Maybe I can get it here. Well, you can't count on Wikipedia all the time or most of the time for exact truths. You can get a good run at it. It's a great place if you want to research something. It's really quite a good place to because they highlight a lot of stuff, eh? And so whatever's on the Wikipedia page, whatever it is, really matters or doesn't matter, but you can catch some pretty good links to people that you may not know about. Okay, so we're just going to run this quick. Definition concept. The term environmental refugees was first proposed by Lester Brown in 1976. Since then, there has been a proliferation in the use of the term at which environment migrant and a cluster of similar categories, including forced environmental migrant, environmentally motivated migrant, climate refugee, climate change refugee, environmentally displaced person, disaster refugee, environmental displacee, eco-refugee, ecologically displaced person, and environmental refugee to be. So these would be future environmental refugees. They're not yet, but they will be. Have been utilized. The difference between these terms are less important than what they have in common. They all suggest that there is a determinable relationship between environmental drivers and human migration, which is analytically useful, policy relevant, and possibly grounds for the expansion of refugee law. Okay? Under the United Nations Convention relating to the status of refugees of 1951, a refugee is more narrowly defined in Article 1A as a person who, owing to a well-founded fear of being persecuted for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group or political opinion, is outside the country of his nationality and is unable to, or owing to such fears, unwilling to avail himself of the protection of that country. While the concept of refugee has expanded by the Convention's 1967 protocol and by regional conventions in Africa and Latin America to include persons who have fled war and other violence in their home country, in its present state, the convention does not provide long-term legal protection to refugees due to environmental change. So the International Organization for Migration proposes the following definition for environmental migrants. Environmental migrants are persons or groups of persons who, for compelling reasons or sudden or progressive changes in the environment that adversely affect their lives or living conditions, are obliged to leave their natural or their habitual homes or choose to do so, either temporarily or permanently, and move either within their country or abroad. The problem is this whole migration, this whole refugee migrant movement that's going on. everywhere, especially into the West. You don't see too many people from the West trying to migrate to Nigeria or Syria or any of those other places. But they're being driven out of there on purpose. Okay? Because what is one of the goals of the world government? Is the end of the nation state. Now, a nation is a group of people who have similar values and likes and languages. That's what makes a nation. So the idea is to flood your nation with everything that isn't your nation, which destroys your nation. Now, your nation becomes an international nation now under the international law. Now, I'm going to, if I can find this real quick here. These hour shows are really short. But I just, now that we've done all this, I don't know if I read any of this stuff or not before. But it is, it links into what we're talking about what's going to go on here starting September 21st and continuing through and into Paris and everywhere else. It's all about ink and deals, okay? And for all those people that think you have a government that is there to serve the people, get over that, please. No such thing. Doesn't exist. Hadn't existed for a very, 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 very long time. Okay? These are memories that you're hanging on to. These are thoughts of the way you wish it was, the way you remember it was. It's not the way it is. And they use that because that's how people are. They use that, You keep flying the flag and keep waving the flag. Maybe sometime long ago it made sense. It don't make any sense anymore, and they know it. But they keep you doing that while they're working out over here. Now, legalism, I think I've mentioned this before, and I can't remember if I read some of this or not, but I'm going to buzz through some of it because it's very important. And this will explain to you how you're being undermined by your own governments. See, we're talking about a world state now. We're not talking about your state. We're talking about the world state. How do we make a world state? How do we make everybody subject to the world state? Well, nobody's going to do it willingly. That's why the League of Nations failed. Again, the American people still had enough history in their brains. The public school system hadn't drained their brain yet. They still were working from a moral point, not a legal point, which is an amoral point, but a moral point, which is a law point. And they knew right from wrong and all the rest of it. And they knew that this idea of giving up sovereignty, we just fought a war to be free. And you want us to give up our sovereignty? Take a hike. That's why it failed. But they don't quit. They keep working in the background until they get what they want. But this will explain how our countries have been hoodwinked, or the people in the countries have been hoodwinked. The tendency to profess legal grounds for U.S. foreign policies is a second core belief underpinning the American ideology. The inclination to embrace legalism springs from rejection of the balance of power approach as the means for preserving U.S. national security, and from the liberal assumptions that people are rational human beings who loathe war and prefer the peaceful settlement of disputes. In modern times, U.S. foreign policy clearly contributed to the creation of a global system of institutions, and legal rules that allows states to settle their disputes without use of force. This legal legalism perspective is well embodied in active U.S. participation in international rulemaking and in the multitude of contemporary international institutions that the United States has joined and in great part has been responsible for establishing. Paramount among these is the United Nations, which was envisioned through the political initiative of the United States at Dumbarton Oaks in 1944 and San Francisco in 1945. The United States was also the main architect for designing and negotiating the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, and that's the World Bank, and the International Monetary Fund to reconstruct the post-World War II international economic order. From 1987 to 94, the United States assumed a leading role in negotiating the World Trade Organization, which effectively rewrote the 1947 General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade in an effort to provide legal rules inclusive of mandatory dispute settlement for international commercial transactions. At the end of the 20th century, the United States assumed an intensely active internationalist role as it participated in more than 1,000 intergovernmental organizations, most of which were conceived through the U.S. political initiatives and were sustained with substantial U.S. financial support. In this regard, it is critical to appreciate that nearly all of these international organizations were empowered to negotiate and create new legal rules, both for internal administration and as international regulations. As a global superpower with worldwide interests, the United States remained intimately involved in that norm creating process through these global institutions. Okay, so it is all about, and that's what Rockefeller refers them to. See, so, you've been accused of being an internationalist. Well, I stand guilty, and I'm proud of it. Okay? And you got your Council of Foreign Affairs, of Foreign Business. You got your Trilateral Commission. You got the UN sitting on your soil. I mean, what's it take? But the media, the damn media. And a lot of the times over the years, they've laughed. Oh, the UN, it's got no teeth. It's nothing. Don't worry about it. Look the other way. Look at this over here. And don't look at what you should be looking at. Don't look at the treasonous dogs that are tearing your countries apart. Look over here. For the United States, the rule-making facet of legalism rests in the critical legal principle of a government pledging its willingness to abide by international agreements to which it has voluntarily committed itself. This legal principle, known as pacta sunt servanda, which is servitude, and drawn from the domestic practice of contract law, asserts that treaties made in good faith between governments are binding. While no meaningful police or judicial mechanisms are available to enforce international agreements, unlike your local law, which is not law, it is corporate legal fiction, crap rules and regulations, where it's given the color and force of law. Over here on the international side, we have the color of law, but we don't yet have the force of law. That's coming if we don't stop it. So let me see here. Let's see. No force to nothing to enforce international agreements. State practice clearly indicates that all governments, including the United States, overwhelmingly abide by their treaty obligations for two fundamental reasons. First, it is in their national interest to do so. Second, abrogation of treaty commitments absent legitimate justification deprives a government of its political and legal credibility with the rest of the international community. The United States, like all states, honors its treaties obligations principally because those rules benefit American foreign policy interests. To spotlight this point, in 2001, the United States was party to more than 5,000, let me repeat that, In 2001, the United States was party to more than 5,000 international agreements, of which more than 500 were prominent multilateral conventions. If treaty-based legal rules were nugatory or for U.S. foreign policy, why pursue the painstaking political effort to negotiate, ratify, and consolidate such an impressive array of international instruments into legally binding obligations? The answer is plain. International legal agreements are not worthless. These rule-making documents well serve U.S. national interest, and upholding their obligations provides the United States with greater constructive opportunities and legal latitude in its relations with other states. What a load of crap, eh? They gutting you out. You've already been gutted out. We've been gutted out. Where's our jobs? Well, our foreign policy boys were, signing on to these international agreements, which were set up to gut your country. Legalisms place heavy burdens on U.S. foreign policy, especially when considerations are given to the use of military force internationally. By rejecting the power of politics approach, policymakers cannot assert national security self-interest as the only justification for engaging in armed conflict abroad. Instead, U.S. foreign policy actions may be dressed in legal principles to explain the basis for those decisions. Several examples demonstrate this pronounced tendency to justify the grounds for military action in legal terms, including resort to using the United Nations as an umbrella of legitimacy to prosecute the Korean War in 1950, the Gulf War in 1991, citing a request from the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States as partial legal justification for the 1983 invasion of Grenada, and use of NATO to sanction the lawfulness of U.S. action in Bosnia in 94, 95, and Kosovo in 2000. Okay, so the very body that was set up to diffuse, that's what they told you at the end of World War II, was that the United Nations was the body that all the countries worked together to diffuse any other country from getting aggressive in that. Instead, they used it for an umbrella excuse as where they could go in and continue bombing people. It's all backwards, all upside down, it's all bullshit, it's all lies, and we have to come to terms with that real quick. Let's see here. Americans often justify political goals and foreign policy actions in moral terms and evaluate outcomes of events through a prism of moralistic values. There's nothing moral about what's going on. This occurs when the government seeks to explain to the American public why foreign assistance for some state might be necessary. Numerous examples of such cases can be found during the Cold War, as the United States often asserted moral principles to justify aid to pro-democratic governments aimed at suppressing communist insurgencies in Greece in 47, Lebanon in 58, Dominican Republic 65, El Salvador 81 to 84, Grenada in 83. One might also add the decision to send military and food aid during the widespread famine in Somalia in late 92, U.S. participation in massive refugee relief efforts similarly rest on pillars of moral value, as well illustrated in the tragedies that grip Bosnia, Burundi, Rwanda, and Kosovo. Idealism, or the vision that advocates that international peace is desirable and possible, also remains salient as a theme in American legalism. American idealists believe that violence and conflict represent human failures that can be overcome through educations. Idealists find clear accepted moral values in international agreements such as the United Nations Charter on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. They are closely aware of moral claims by other governments and tend to advocate greater access for people in other countries to civil rights and liberties, healthcare, housing, education. Idealists emphasize the importance of applying the principle of self-determination in U.S. foreign policy to peoples abroad and more likely to advocate multilateral than unilateral action in world affairs. The integration of idealism with legalism's productivity for establishing institutional structures served as the catalyst for the United States through President Woodrow Wilson, same guy that pushed like hell for the League of Nations, same guy that brought the Fed, to assume the leading role in establishing the League of Nations in 1919, for supporting the United Nations in 1945. Idealism also fostered the rapid promotion of acceptability of human rights law in U.S. foreign policy programs and treaty commitments. So this goes on, and all it does is tell you exactly what Cicero warned of way back in whatever AD, or AD, yeah, BC, whenever, long time ago. This is exactly what he warned about. Okay, getting taken down from the inside. And that's really, sad that people even pay any attention to politics anymore. Did any of the politicians running in any of the elections that anybody ever voted in mention any of this garbage? Of course they didn't. Their job is not to alert you or to get you knowledge. It's to keep you in the dark. Well, did you hear what so-and-so said at that, when they did, that politician said, and they'll run with that in the media? That's noisy. 2 days later, somebody else does something, they run with that. Never get to an issue. And that's just what the NDP guy said to me at the end of the election I ran in. Do you realize if you hadn't run in this election, not one issue of any importance would have ever been allowed to see the light of day? You brought them and you slammed them up on the table and you had us dancing. And that's what we got to do. We got to make these people dance. I guess he's going to do Chester in the morning. We have got to keep shining the light on these people. We got to keep working at them. The upside is, like you look at this thing that's going to go on in New York this March on the 21st. They're expecting 100,000 people there. So New York City's a big city, so it shouldn't be hard to get 100,000 people just straight out of New York. But they're going to have to bus people in, apparently, from 300 different schools and bring people in from all over Hell's Half Acre. So, they really don't have, there's 310 million people in the United States, give or take. And so 100,000 people marching down the street is really not even a drop in the American bucket. But they're going to get an awful pile of airplay, and the media is going to pound this, okay? And you're never going to hear any media going, what are 200 different religious organizations doing here? What the hell's that all about? I thought we were a Christian nation. Who are these people? Who's that snake charmer over there, right? But this is about the destruction of the nation state. That's your state. That's your homeland. The same thing's going on here. We got so much unused land here, but they're going to open the floodgates just like they did in in America, and they're going to flood the places with people from everywhere. And we're going to end up submitting to, it used to be the melting pot. When you come to Canada, you're supposed to assimilate. When you went to the United States, you were supposed to assimilate. And it worked well because in Canada here, it was mostly, European people. But, the Italians maybe didn't like the Polish or, all this kind of stuff going on. But people assimilated into the idea of what this place was supposed to be, and but all of those groups still had, I'm sure America's the same way. We all the different groups of people have their own community halls, and that's fantastic, and that's where they keep their culture alive. But they don't come and drive their culture to undermine the main culture. Okay, so now we've got all these different groups coming, and I remember years ago, when say the police here, you had to be a certain height, certain weight, you had to have your hair cut a certain way, and you didn't have facial hair, and this and that and the other thing, yada yada yada. I know I couldn't have been a cop, I can't stand all them rules, but very strict. And then the East Indian population started moving in. Now, all of a sudden, the rules got to change. Why do the rules have to change? Well, because, his culture, he likes to wear a turban, and he likes to have a dagger and stuff on him and stuff. So now we have to, him not assimilate to us, but we have to assimilate to him. Ass backwards. You look over in Europe now, I mean, for crying out loud, in Britain, they got places in there where they're using Sharia law. How'd that happen? If I go to the Middle East and I say, well, I don't like your law here, I think we need to start a new courthouse with my law. Ain't going to happen, ever. But we're doing it here. We're rolling over like a bunch of marshmallows. And we got to stop that. All the things that people never thought could happen in North America are happening. You don't have to go far to look around and see homeless people. You don't have to look far to see hungry people. You don't have to look far to see violence. Most of the violence is created by hardship. Or the drugs that the government's brought in, the same kind of thing they did when they took over China with the opium wars. We have got to put our freaking foot down. The answer is no. Hit the freaking road, Jack, and don't come back. We got to do that. We can't just lay down and let them keep coming. And we have the power to shove them out of here. There's a lot more of us than there are of them. And there's not much they can do about it. Now, I really wanted to... I don't have time now. I think I'll do a whole show here in the not-too-distant future about some history of Canada. Now, I'd mentioned this before, and I ran across some pretty interesting stuff, like the Liberty flag and whatnot, that I didn't know was ever even thought of here, and some of that history. And then I ran into some Jesuit history here of when we actually sent the Pope, I think it was $400,000 back in 1889 or something, because they'd taken the Jesuit lands once the Jesuits had been disbanded, and then when they started coming back again, they started wanting land back, and there was actually a fight, and between the Fed, well, I guess what you would call kind of the Feds and early Feds and the province, and not wanting these Jesuits to get this land. And there's a very telling statement in there about the Jesuits, and it doesn't sound unlike the Jews, really. And I'm going to put that together and read it, because it's pretty mind-boggling stuff what was said. Somebody brought a motion forward to stop the bill that was going to allow this payment over to the Pope, and his motion was defeated by both the Liberals and the Conservatives. And that kind of throws me, because I have a thing up on my site about Wilfrid Laurier, who made this speech about when you come to Canada, you come here to be a Canadian, because you can't be Canadian in something else. And then I find out Laurier was involved in the voting down of this motion, not to appease the Pope and the Jesuits. And there's some very interesting things said during those discussions. And there was warnings from those who brought the motion forward and said what was going to happen. And it has happened. And this is where we are now. Today, that was 1889, I think, and this is 2015. And Pope's coming to town. You know, they have the United States cut up into, I think it's 10 Jesuit provinces. The hell's going on here? You know, we got to stop watching these stupid-ass televisions and picking up their newspapers. It just, you know, when I go to get a coffee or something, and I see people picking up newspapers and taking it to the counter, paying $2 or $3 or whatever newspaper costs now. I haven't bought one in a lot of years. This makes me cringe. Because this man or woman bought this thing, and they're going to take it home now, thinking that they're getting some kind of useful information out of this. Not understanding that they're just being mentally messed with. Makes me cringe. You know, I just want to grab the newspaper out of their hands and put that damn thing back. You're not allowed to have a newspaper. You know, just go get your coffee and get the hell out of here. You know, hit the road. Go learn something. But anyways, you know, we got some really interesting times coming. And we're going to see how this plays out. And but make no mistake about it, you know, like when you think your government is working for you and you wonder why what's going on is going on, all you got to do is go in and check out their international policies and everything they've signed on with the UN that they consider binding. Of course, it's not binding, it's treason. Okay? They have no authority whatsoever to be running around cutting agreements behind the people's backs, agreements that are cooked up in order to hurt the very people that this government says it serves. It's absolute, in your face. Well, it's not in your face till you know about it. It's behind your back treason, but it's treason. And they're saying that they have to abide by the agreements they made. Well, fine, but you weren't involved in it. You didn't know anything about it. And I don't know, maybe there is. Maybe somebody wants to look up in the Constitution. I don't think it's in the Canadian Constitution, where that your elected members of government have free reign to run around the world, cut negative agreements that is helping to push a world government and destroy your own nation. I don't think you're going to find that in either constitution. In fact, I'm sure you're not going to find it. So, you know, it's school time for everybody. And always remember old Rockefeller, you know, our window of opportunity's already begun to close. And it has. And it's up to us to take that window sash and drive it down on them bony old 100-year-old fingers or whatever they are. And put Soros's fingers in there. Put Prince Philip's fingers in there. Grab up the Rothschilds, stuff their fingers in there. And slam that window down shut. So they can't irritate anybody on this planet anymore. We got to get back. We have got to get back to controlling our own lands. And I'm sure we will, because once this all shakes out, the people are going to be so ticked that these are going to have to run away. They're not going to have a choice. Anyways, that's the music I hear, and so that must be 8 o'clock. I got to go down the street and walk Angus's dog. He's out of town, so I got to do that right now. Everybody have a great rest of the week, and we'll see you back here on Sunday. Remember, UCY, spread the word, get this station out far and wide. Okay, take care, everybody. I'm done.